Segunda Beach has been growing at an unprecedented rate, and honestly, it's no surprise. With its beautiful location, unique architecture, top-tier university, and a brand new cruise port, it was bound to attract new residents. But not even Mayor Beacon could have imagined the population doubling in just a few short years. With rapid growth comes growing pains, like traffic. The roads in the area have become a nightmare. The lack of state highways makes it hard to get anywhere, and the region's poor connectivity has often been cited as a reason why major businesses won't move into the area. Even existing companies like Drake Oil have voiced concerns, saying inadequate infrastructure is holding them back. But the final straw was a wave of business closures. Owners blamed one thing: traffic. When it's a hassle to get to businesses, people just don't show up. All this pressure forced an unlikely alliance between Mayor Beacon and Russ Becker. It's no secret that they can't stand each other, but sometimes shared problems make for strange bedfellows. Together, they pushed the state to build the great separated highway that had been planned decades ago. But highway construction is expensive and disruptive, and the State Department of Transportation typically reserves such projects for areas with severe safety concerns or high traffic volumes. Instead, state planners recommend an expressway, a much more cost-effective solution that would preserve the rural character of the region while providing much-needed traffic relief. This new expressway would feature mostly at-grade intersections, with a few full interchanges in key areas. Despite vocal opposition from some local officials and business owners, the expressway was ultimately approved as part of the state's budget. So in today's episode, we're going to bring this plan to life. We'll replace the existing highway with a bi-directional highway, using supernodes that create realistic intersections. We'll also construct interchanges at Cedar Street and Garland Street, as well as an overpass at Segunda Beach Boulevard. And I'll walk you through the reasoning behind each of these as we build them. On top of that, we'll add new high-voltage power lines and transformer stations along the corridor, laying the groundwork for continued growth in the region. And if you're excited to build an expressway, hit the like button. If you think the state should have just gone all in with an interstate standard highway, hit the like button for that too, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Or just drop an emoji representing highways for the sake of engagement. And without further ado, let's jump right in. One thing unique about me as a builder is I don't like to build while the game is paused. So as a result, we're going to be building a power infrastructure and a highway diversion project before we build our expressway. Otherwise, the city would collapse. Now, I know there's a bit of irony to talking about being on pause while we're on pause, but we have to be on pause momentarily because we just got the new patch for City Skylines 2. Now, this patch is going to do a number of things. It's going to cause a massive decrease in our population, then we're going to see a whole bunch of people move in, and our entire economy is going to change. And that is why we are currently paused. I want to make one small adjustment to our taxation for commercial electronics businesses, because just like in Magnolia County, we have way more of them than we need. So I'm going to bump the tax rate up to 12%, which will gently encourage some of them to leave our community. And hopefully they'll be replaced with things like convenience food and meals and vehicles, things that we are a little bit short of. Now, in terms of other adjustments to respond to this new patch, I'm not really going to make any. I think that the expressway is the biggest adjustment because we're going to see a ton of traffic. So let's resume things and get building. And we're going to begin with a bunch of transformer stations. The first of which is going to be here in our industrial park. And then we'll establish a high voltage line that we just run along the side of this road and right along the side of the hill right here. Our next transformer is going to be right downtown. And I've been reluctant to build anything in this location because I've been saving it for an expanded bus station. But I don't know that that's the right choice. I think that we have to go with a transformer. And the reason for that is this whole area is going to have a lot more density and it could end up being a bottleneck. So I'm going to try to line this up with the grid right here. And I provided enough separation that hopefully we can screen this with a bunch of landscaping. Now I think I'm going to bury the power line here because this is going to get really complicated in this area as we build our new expressway. And now that we're over here, I think I'll bring this above ground once again as we build out in the more rural areas. Over here by our landfill, we need to reorient this transformer, otherwise we won't be able to make a nice connection. So I'm going to delete this and place a new one right here. Now the main reason that I deleted this and didn't replace this is one of the things that I've noticed with this new patch is that it can be difficult to connect high voltage lines to previously built transformer stations. So just anticipating that, we're going to build a brand new one. And that even though I would like all of these to be closer to the highway so that it lines up, this is existing infrastructure. So rather than rebuilding all of it, I think I'll take a couple of these pylons back just so we have a nicer transition, and we will preserve these older ones. And that should be all that we need in terms of new transformers. So I want to start eliminating the low voltage infrastructure, but I'm going to keep close eye on things because things could start to break down. For instance, right now there's no connection in between our forestry industry right here and our landfill. So I have a feeling that as soon as I delete the low voltage lines here, we're going to see this become disconnected. And indeed, this breaks down. So I think in this particular instance, I'm going to do something that maybe isn't the height of realism, and I'm going to bury this underneath this path. Maybe actually that's why this path exists. Now, one place we're going to have to add a bit of infrastructure is right here going out to the farm. I think in this instance, though, I will bury this power line because it will conflict, and I don't want to deal with that. So this is fantastic. We have no more low voltage lines that are conflicting with our highway. But now we have to think about that highway diversion. And one of the reasons I've been really excited to build this is I built this road here during a live stream when we first started the series, and it just doesn't really go anywhere or make sense or have a purpose. But I want to imagine that this road was built for the highway diversion project. So we're going to just extend this all the way to our highway here, and then we'll just sever this. And now all of that traffic is forced to go down this road. The one change that I feel like we have to make is that we'll upgrade this to highway standards. And we also need to provide some sort of access to the farm. So I'll extend that straight down for now. I'm going to add one more highway bypass right here, but I just noticed that our vineyard is not connected to power. So I'm going to reestablish that connection. And I think I'll just bury a power line right about here. And for this bypass, I'm just going to take this highway and do something like that. And then we're going to sever these connections. Now, I'm not going to get rid of this interchange because I think that with a couple of modifications, this can still work for us. But the net result of all the changes that we've made is that all traffic is going to have to drive through town while we're building the expressway, which is unfortunately incredibly realistic. And the final thing I want to do is remove the old highway. And now I'm realizing we didn't need that power line because we need a temporary access to the vineyard anyway, so I'll just add this road right here. And then the final thing we need to do is take this regional bus and get this bumped over here. And I've taken those stops and added them to existing stops here on Pacific Avenue. This is not ideal considering this is a regional route, but it will do the trick for now. So with our diversion and power infrastructure in place, let's move on to building our expressway. Before we start building our expressway, I wanted to show you the real-world inspiration behind it, the Pacific Coast Highway in California. Now, this is a breathtaking stretch of road that links Northern California to Southern California along the Pacific Coast, and it passes through some of the most beautiful terrain in all of North America, as well as some of its biggest cities. The Pacific Coast Highway is found in both Los Angeles and San Francisco. Both the Golden Gate Bridge and this road here in Malibu are both the Pacific Coast Highway, as is this rural road right here. So that shows you the many different forms that the Pacific Coast Highway can take. And in Morro Bay, the place where we got the height map for Segunda Beach, it looks like this, an expressway. Now, Segunda Beach will become larger than Morro Bay, so eventually we'll probably have to build this to interstate standards. But for now, I want to take a lot of inspiration from Morro Bay. And because of that, we're going to have a couple of interchanges and a whole lot of at-grade intersections. But beyond the intersections and interchanges, I also want to have this fence in between the highway. And that's something that's a little bit difficult to do in city skylines too, but I have a plan. I want to take the 2-lane, one-way road and parallel these. We're to bring them really close to one another, as close as we can, 0.25. And using anarchy, I'm going to add a key wall to the center. And I'm hoping that this allows me to have a barrier in between. And it does. It's not perfect, but it feels like that safety barrier in between the highways that exists in the real world. So that's what we're going to do for this entire highway. We're going to begin by building the expressway, then we'll add our supernodes, and then we'll build our interchanges. Now, a couple of things I want to keep in mind while I'm doing this. I want to make sure that anarchy is off whenever possible, and I want to make sure that I have constant slope selected. This will ensure that I don't have to grade, which if I can avoid that, it's going to make this whole process a ton easier. Now we're over here by Drake Oil, and I was thinking that I would try to mirror this road, but I'm afraid I'm going to break it. So instead of doing that, I think I'm just going to build another highway right next to this one, and we'll imagine that the DOT is going to decommission this road and preserve the right-of-way for future highway expansion. So to that end, I'm just going to add this right here, right next to it. And I'll need to add a small segment with anarchy on because I have those barriers, but I'm going to turn it off right away. Now that all of our highway infrastructure is in place, let's start adding our super nodes. And the first one is going to go right about here. And that's because I think that we need to have some sort of a local roadway connection linking up this highway to our industrial area. Now I know that we already have this one, but this is temporary, so this will be decommissioned down the line. So I'm going to begin by adding a new local road right here. And now we have to decommission a little bit of the highway. And that's because I want to add one gigantic roundabout right here. Then we can bring our highway back and reestablish these connections. Now, one thing that I don't love is it gave us a key wall right here. Thankfully, if we have anarchy, we can just go to the key wall tool, right mouse click that key wall, and it will remove it. Speaking of removing, now I want to remove this roundabout, and we have a super node. So the super node basically links both sides of the highway, and it allows us to place one stoplight here that controls both legs. So this is the preferred way of handling this if you're going to have a bidirectional highway with an intersection on it. But we're not quite done with this road, so I'm going to make our connection into the business park. And then I've blocked the stream right here, so I'm going to upgrade this to be elevated. And then the final important piece of this is going to be adding a dirt road linking up our farms to our industrial area. And that will allow me to sever this connection right here. But I think I'll keep this one, at least for the time being. Now, as we make our way up to Cedar Street, this will be a full interchange. So we don't need to build a super node here. But I do think I will establish this road all the way through to our industrial park. And then I'm going to convert the Hemlock Highway to be a 4-lane arterial just like Cedar Street. And for whatever reason, we got a little bit of jank right here, so I'm going to use Move It to try to improve this. Much better. Now, coming back to the Expressway, we need to go up and over Cedar Street. So I've done so while staying as close to the ground as possible. And one of the main reasons I decided to make this an interchange right here is the amount of traffic I expect to see from the business park heading down Cedar Street onto the highway. And we'll contrast that with Segunda Beach Boulevard, which we're actually going to turn into a local road heading into the business park. And the reason we're not making this an interchange is I don't want all of that regional traffic going straight down Segunda Beach Boulevard, which will basically be the gem of our community. So to that end, I'm going to replace this road right here with a local street. And then we're going to go up and over the top of it. Now, before we move on from this, I am going to fix this path. And this will unfortunately just be much less interesting now. Now, I think for this connection right here, we're probably going to have a bridge up and over the top of this highway. And then I'll clean this bridge up so it feels a little bit more realistic, adding nodes right here. And we'll remove these key walls, which makes it feel like earthwork was done to complete this bridge, which is much more realistic. Now, I think I will take this interchange on right away because this is really just a reconfiguration of what's already there. And now this is just about perfect, so we can reestablish this connection as well. And now it's time for two super nodes, one right here and one right here. Now for both of these, we're gonna have to eliminate the highway and apparently inadvertently eliminate part of the power line as well. Now the whole reason that we have to do that once again is to add a gigantic roundabout at the end of this, and then we can once again reestablish our highway.
What? Here we go again.
Now, interestingly, I've not been able to get rid of these roundabouts right here, and I'm wondering if that's because of the road that we used going into the roundabout. So I'm going to temporarily upgrade these to be 2-lane roads. Oh, that unfortunately did not do it for us. I think it was because I left anarchy on. Oh.
Serenity now! Serenity now! Oh my God! Wow!
And indeed, that was the problem, and that's what I get for deviating from my own rules. Now, I am noticing that we don't have a connection here for water anymore, so I will reestablish that. And then we have bus stops here as well. I think I'm going to add one bus stop right down there by our industrial area. And I'll have them swing in there one time on the way out of town. And our final super node is going to be right here by Drake Oil. And interestingly, even though I didn't have anarchy on for this one, it still broke. So I had to redraw it back in, but the second time was a charm. And once more, I'm going to move these bus stops. I'll move them right here. And ultimately, I was able to fix this one by redoing the outside connection. So now we should be good to go. But there's one major thing that I want to do for all of the super nodes. That is control all of the intersections. So we're going to add traffic signals right here. Then I want to give dedicated turn lanes. And I want to use move it to clean everything up. So you're not driving into a turn lane, for instance. I'm also going to make these junctions a little bit wider to improve the movement through them. And then lastly, we'll use traffic to control the movements through here. And this, for better or for worse, is exactly what I'd expect to see on an expressway like this one. Now, the core feature of this, again, is that this is just one intersection right here. So we have one set of lights. So when the main highway gets a red light, this movement gets to proceed through and vice versa. It's not two movements. So the drivers coming from here won't get stuck right here. It's all one junction. Now I want to quickly configure the rest of these, but I did want to point out we have a bit of Drake oil that's burned down and I can't repair it because we don't have a disaster response unit. So at some point in the near future, we are going to need to add a proper fire station with a disaster response unit, but that day is not today. We don't have any money. And for this last intersection, I decided to go big and have turn lanes on either side. These are the scariest types of intersections, but they exist because there's likely a lot of traffic volume here, and adding those turning lanes gives you extra capacity. So that's what we've done in this location, and it actually functions really, really well. But I think part of the reason it's functioning so well is we're not completely connected right now. So let's complete our final connection out of town. And I'll hold off on adding a super node here, but we will keep this road here as right-of-way that was acquired as a part of this project. And with our expressway constructed, let's move on to building our interchanges. We're going to be adding 2 interchanges to the community. One right here to serve the business park and one right here to serve the downtown. I'm going to begin with the one to serve the business park because I think it's going to be a fairly simple one. For this, I just want to have simple ramps that meet up here at Cedar Street at 90-degree angles. So I'm going to begin with what I think is going to be the easiest movement here. And I'm going to add a 3rd lane onto the highway. And then we'll meet up at Cedar Street at a 90. And then finally, I'll use the complex curve tool to link these ramps into the highway. And I ended up wanting a great deal of precision on these ramps, so I was toggling snapping as I was going through and adding curvature to this. And I think that sometimes you have to do that. If you want this to look nice and clean, you've got to be willing to take it a little bit slower. Now that's going to be especially true on this next leg because we're going to be meeting up with this road at a 45-degree angle. Now because of that, I'm going to draw the ramps here at 90s first. And then once again, we're going to be toggling things on and off to make this work. And I've made this merge a little bit longer considering this ramp is not very long. You can see that it's gotten a little bit janky here. I'm going to see if I can move it, fix this. If not, I'll just redraw it. Not the end of the world. And that's not so bad. That'll work. Now for this one, it's going to be a bit more complicated. We've got a bit of grade to work with, but we're going to use that to our advantage. So we'll again upgrade the highway, and then just looking at the contour lines for where we want to merge, it looks like this is going to be the dominant line. So we need to come up about 15 meters. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump in here with a 90. And then we'll do the exact same thing right into the highway. We ended up coming at 145, but honestly, I think it's completely fine. The only thing I regret is that most of our incline is happening right here, or our decline rather, and you can see that the contour lines get pretty tight. I'm going to use Move It to try to improve this. And I think that that is considerably better. You can see that the contour lines are spread a bit further apart now. And just reasonably, I think that this is going to be a heavily utilized interchange, which is why I'm preemptively adding these lanes. If it needs more, we'll add more in the future, but for now, I think that this is going to do the trick. For our second interchange, we're going to be taking a lot of inspiration from Morro Bay, and we're going to be building a fairly messy trumpet interchange at a 45-degree angle. We're going to have lots of local connections. So the very first thing I want to do is acquire some tiles because we're going to need them. The first one I'm going to need is this one right here. We're going to be building into this tile, but then I also want to get this one because I want to have a local roadway connection to be a part of this project. And then we'll leave the top of the hill orphan, so I'll pick this one up as well. And hopefully this won't impact us too much considering we're in the green with our budget. Now, the first thing I want to do is eliminate this little stub of this arterial, and we'll build our 45-degree angle ramp across the highway. And I tried to make sure that I was getting this to ground level as quickly as possible. And thankfully, because of the terrain of the hillside, we didn't really have to do all that much work here. Now for this next leg, I just want it to look really natural. This is going to be the trumpet part, and I'm going to use the continuous tool. And it's not happy about this slope. I'm going to use Move It to fix this. I think grading would have been the ideal solution here, but sometimes you've got to do things that aren't exactly perfect. And this is going to make it a ton easier for us. And this will be good enough for now, so I'm going to add the extra lanes here. And then I'm going to convert this segment right here so that we only have one movement. Now I'm going to use the continuous tool to add our next leg here. And then finally, I'm going to use Move It one more time to clean up the lanes right here. You can see that they're crossing a bit. And if we were building this to interstate standards, I don't think that we could get away with this. But because this is an expressway, we are going to allow it. Now for our next movement, things are going to get even wackier. And I'll begin by adding a couple of lanes down there, and then we'll add some underneath the bridge here. And we'll quickly link into this road right here, just straight through. And then for our next one, I'll add a lane right here, and then we'll 90 straight from here into this lane. And again, not 100% perfect, but we can easily fix this with Move It. Now I'm gonna add a double roundabout. And we'll go with something like this that I believe will make this the most loved interchange in the entire city. And finally, I want to extend additional local access. So for this, I want to mirror the hillside and ensure that we always stay at ground level. So I'm going to use the continuous tool, and we're just going to go along this with a local road. Local roads like this one are built all the time during highway projects, with the idea that you could take that local traffic and keep it on local roads and keep the highway for regional traffic. And that's what we've attempted to do here, and you can see that we've got a couple of vehicles already using this road. Now, the other thing that this will do is open up development opportunities right here and right here. And I could see a truck stop or some sort of commercial building opening right here, considering the visibility and the access would both be outstanding. And on that note about local roads, we're going to add one more all the way along the highway. Now, the reason for this one is going to be because as a part of these highway projects, the Department of Transportation is likely to acquire a lot of property. And after the project is done, they're going to have property that they want to sell to make a bit of money to help pay for this project. So we're going to imagine that they install a local road right here and basically open this all up to a mixture of residential and commercial opportunities. And I think that an addition like this would be very plausible in this area. And with that, our interchanges are complete. Now, before we fill this area in with zoning, I want to make some fixes based on your feedback. Normally, I reserve fixes based on your feedback till the end of the episode. However, during the last episode, I asked one big piece of feedback. Should we take all of our existing city blocks and divide them in half? And you guys overwhelmingly said, yes, divide them in half, increase the density. So before we zone things in along the highway, I want to divide these blocks in half, and then we'll take all the zoning on at once. So what we're going to do is just find all these blocks that have the trees in between them and add a road right in between all the homes. And in my opinion, this looks like a much more appropriate roadway density for this city, particularly in a place that we expect to be urban. So I like this change. And with our fix in place, let's move on to zoning. I don't want to overcomplicate the zoning today. What I want to do is just basically extend zoning that we already have into places that don't have it. Now, where this will get complicated is in the areas that we just added new streets. Because basically, some of these blocks are so narrow that they won't allow things to spawn in. And others are so incoherent that it's going to look crazy if we just zone in these areas. So I think we need to call a fairly substantial mulligan and basically de-zone this entire area and rezone it. So we are going to see a mass exodus of people. We're going to see a whole bunch of people move back in. It's going to be pandemonium, but I kind of like this because it will test our new interchanges. So I'm not going to worry all that much about it. So the way that I'm going to handle this is, once again, I'll just go through here, de-zone everything, and then I'll add the southwestern zoning back in, but I'll do so in a very controlled way. We're also going to be using art to make sure that no zoning is lining up on our side streets. And in cases where maybe the building size got a little bit out of hand, like right here, I'll make sure that we're adding something that's a bit more appropriate. My goodness, I went a little bit harder than I expected to. I ended up redoing most of the zoning through here and then even getting rid of some of the buildings that we plopped, trying to make sure that we have a nice taper in our densities. And truthfully, this feels a lot better to me. You can see that right here, we have our tallest buildings along the coast. And as we get closer to our single family homes, we step down our densities. And that's what you like to see in the real world too, because we're considerate of shadows then, making sure that some of these buildings aren't being completely covered with shadows throughout the day. The other thing that I've done is wherever there were small pockets of developable land, we've added in some single family homes. And that's something that's fairly common in Southern and Central California, Northern California. You would see every last pocket of land developed. Now, one thing we may do is go back through here once again and add offices and things of that nature, but that's probably a future project. For now, even though a lot of these buildings look the same, I think it feels pretty authentic. And that's because in many cases, these neighborhoods are developed by the same developer. So you wouldn't expect to see a lot of variation. You'd expect to see the same home over and over again with some stylistic changes, different color roofs, different color siding, maybe a slightly different elevation for the building. But for the most part, it's a repeating pattern, and that's completely normal. Now, one thing I did want to point out is I decided to taper the densities here. It felt really abrupt having some of those mid-rises just end as you reach the end of the city here. So we've tapered the densities a little bit. We still have more than just single family homes, and we'll continue to build up the hillside, maybe in the next one. And that in these newer areas, I just repeated the exact same zoning that we had before. And honestly, I feel like it blends pretty well. The one thing I wanted to point out over here is that I did decide to step down here as well. I did use some of the northeastern US buildings. They do fit well, but we might want to be a little more thoughtful with the placement of these once they level up a little bit. We'll have to see how things turn out. And with our zoning complete, let's move on to a bit of landscaping and detailing. So at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, we've been landscaping and detailing as we've been building things. How could there be more to do? Well, there is, and I've already done some of it. One of the things that I've been wanting to do for a while is name every single street in the build. I think it's really important to do that because it really gives your place a personality. So I took a while to do this, and what I've come up with is all the north-south streets are named after prominent people or places, and all of the east-west streets, or at least most of them, are numbered streets. That's why we now have a Ventura Street, a Cesar Chavez Street, and a Washington Street, a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, etc. street. They all have a pattern, and it's an easily expandable pattern to build upon anyway. So that is something that means a lot to me, and I love that because all of these buildings have building numbers, we can now see that we have 88 Sierra Street. So I think that that is really, really fun. In addition to that, I've gone through and cleaned up some of the rural areas in the build. So there were a number of places where the highway had steep drop-offs on the side. I've cleaned things like that up. I've made sure that some of the janky bits are gone. And I've decided to reserve the urban areas for the on-camera portion of this. So I'll show you some of what I did in the rural area right here, for instance. So one thing that you'll notice is that this drops down. And because we've used key walls here, it looks pretty crazy. I really only wanted the fence, but I got the key wall and all of the good and the bad that comes with that. This is an easy fix. All I have to do is grab my slope terrain tool, grab the height, the top height right here, and then slope up to it. And this will fix the middle as well, so long as the center of this interchange or intersection rather is high enough. In this particular instance, it's not. So I'll need to go just a bit higher. So I'll go 35% on a relatively small brush size, shift terrain tool up, and then I'll slope up to this height right here, which was about a meter higher than the intersection. And now this looks like a fence, not like a big divot, which is really kind of what I was looking for. So I will do that all the way through the urban area. Whenever I see something like that happen, I will make that fix. Now, in addition, I do want to make sure that we have space on the side of our highways. So you can see where I fixed this. If you were to drive off the highway, you wouldn't dive off and go down 5 meters. I want to make sure that we're doing that along the highway everywhere as well. And the main reason that I'm doing that is safety. I think that that would make this a much safer highway. If you're not going to have that, I think that you have to have some sort of barrier, and those are very expensive. They get very, very expensive. Next, we're going to take a small break from the highway, and I want to fix this road right here, Hemlock Highway. You can see that Commerce Boulevard kind of does this weird movement with the Hemlock Highway. We have an easy fix here. I'm just going to get rid of Forward Street. Then I just modified this alley right here, turned it into Segunda Beach Boulevard, added a bit of parking right here so it seems like Segunda Beach Boulevard comes in right here for a reason. The reason it's actually here is this building wouldn't work without this road. And then I extended Commerce Boulevard through, which kind of shows us where we're going to extend it to in the future and makes this junction right here function much better. Now we'll make a couple of improvements here to this interchange. And the first one is that we're missing key walls right here, at least on half of this. You can see that on the northbound segment, we have the key walls. So I'll just upgrade using Anarchy. I can easily add those key walls right there. That looks wonderful. Make sure I do it on the inside as well. And then I want to do a little bit of grading to clean this up because you can see it's kind of sharp right here. Now, what I've done to clean this one up is I decided to find the heights where the key wall ends, flatten it out here, and then slope from both ends of this to this location. And it just gives you a nice natural gradient up to where the road meets that key wall. And it just looks really, really nice. Also cleaned up and backed away some of the sloping that we had right here, some of the carving that we had into the hillside, just to make things look a little bit more natural. And I just think it looks nice and clean now. Moving over to Segunda Beach Boulevard, we've got some work to do here. So first of all, you can see that there's just not a lot of space in between Tyler Street and the highway. And the result is that this looks very, very steep and we're starting to see into the upside down. So I've got a solution for this. What I'm thinking is using Anarchy, I'm going to add a retaining wall underneath the road and basically back to where our merge lane ends. And on this other side, we're going to go even further, probably all the way along Tyler Street. Now, before I go any further, I made one small mistake on Segunda Beach Boulevard. I used the 2-lane segment here rather than our 2-lane parking lot road with palm trees. But now that I've caught that, I'm going to bump these buildings back. So we'll call a little bit of a mulligan here. And I've got one more mulligan for here, but I want to fix this area first. So right here, I think that we've got to do something for all the traffic that's forming right here. I'm going to add a small roundabout. Next, I want to fix some of these terrain height concerns. And what I'm thinking is we are going to pull this straight over because we have a retaining wall. And then much like we did with our interchange over there, we're going to slope up to where our key wall meets. And I think that that looks pretty clean right there. Now I want to do a little bit of decorative landscaping to cover up some of the lumpies and the bumpies. And though this probably wasn't necessary, I think it's a nice gateway feature into the downtown. Now speaking of that, I think I want to do a couple of modifications to this area. So first of all, I want to take this public market and get the upgraded model. And that'll just be the level 5 4x4 Northeast Commercial. And this is just such a special building. I feel like I need to plop this one. And that's just a huge improvement to this area. Now we've got a second public market right here and I don't want that. So I'm going to dezone this and we're going to use one of our new leisure asset signature buildings. And we've got this cocktail lounge that I think is going to be perfect for this area. So I'm going to place that right here. This will leave a bit of a gap, but we can add one of our new pocket parks and make a connection in between the alleyway and Segunda Beach Boulevard. And honestly, I think that this is a great way to bring some activity into this area and make this an even more special place. And then near our second interchange, got a couple more height issues to resolve here as well. And then the final thing I want to do along the highway is just make sure that we have a very dense landscape buffer. We're not going to pay for sound walls, but I think that a dense landscape buffer would do the trick here. So there are really two tricks that I want to employ. First, we're going to use the Wild Green Bush 2 with the Advanced Line tool. I want to set a space variation and an offset variation, and then get these things super close to one another. And now as I pull these along, you can see that we get this nice dense row of irregular bushes. And that's exactly what I want all the way along here. And then in addition to that row of bushes, I'm going to add in some oaks, some London planes, and some lindens, and maybe even a couple of palms just to really reinforce this boundary. And you can see that now that we've added this landscape buffer, it really feels like there's separation between the highway and the city, and that's really what we're looking for. This is outstanding. So I'll do this anywhere there's a residential area abutting the highway. And you can feel it on the neighborhood side. It feels just as good as it does on the highway. It really feels like there is a high degree of separation, and it just looks nice. And speaking of things looking nice, I think that we are going to go through all of the streets that we just placed, and maybe some just around the streets that we placed, and add a bunch of palm trees. I think it's going to make it feel really Californian and just make it look a ton nicer. Adding those street trees makes a huge impact in my opinion. I think that this looks outstanding. And with all of that complete, there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. Now I know that this is kind of a weird build to get super excited about, but this has been one of the most fun builds for me. Being able to put together this expressway and not build it completely to freeway standards, build some crazy intersections, build some crazy interchanges, that was a lot of fun for me. Adding the density though, I think might be the most impactful thing that we've done today. I want to thank everyone who left the feedback to get rid of those forests in between the homes and increase the block densities. It really makes it feel more Californian to me. It makes it feel a ton more realistic. The first time I saw all the homes fill in, and to me, it felt like California. And it's probably the first time it actually felt like California to me. So I really between the new assets, between the new block sizes, between the highway, it's starting to come together, and it really feels good to me. And I'm not sure if you've felt this way when you've been building, but there's an awkward place in between founding a city and having a big city where it can start to feel either uncanny valley or just not right. And then you cross this threshold and your city starts to feel good. And I feel like that's where we just got with Segunda Beach. And it gets me really excited because there are so many different directions that we could take this build. Now, I've been thinking I really want to tackle a cargo port, and I want to make it feel really cohesive and like it's a part of this community, and I want to really do a good job with it. But I also want to take your feedback, and if there are things and different builds that you wanted me to take on, drop them in the comments below because I'm really interested in knowing what you want me to build. I'm going to take some of the top suggestions that I see, and I'm going to throw them into a community poll, and I'll build the thing that you guys want to see built. But until then, I think that we're going to leave it here, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you all so much for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. You decided to hang out with me and build expressways and increase the density here in Segunda Beach. And for that, I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.